See, when I teach a student, I watch them play, or I listen to them play. Actually, usually I can tell better what they're doing if I leave the room, and I can hear them from a distance, and I can feel where they're making their sound. I can feel where the vibrato is. I can feel where, their support is. I can sense what's wrong with the hands, and then I say, okay, this is how you're doing it, and then I play it back. And then I say, now, what would happen if you tried this, and what would happen if you tried that, and so forth and so on. And that's how, essentially, I teach them to teach themselves.
Hello, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 36, an interview with Gary Schocker. Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Hi, Gary.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being willing to share your time with us and answering these questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you currently reside in New York City, right?
Well, I live in two different places. I also have a place in Pennsylvania, where I am right now, actually.
Oh, great. Well, first, before we begin and dive into the interview, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for those who may not know you?
Sure. I've been playing music all my life. My father was a music teacher. He studied the piano and the harp, went to Juilliard when it was called the Institute of Music and Art in New York. And so he was my teacher for the piano and the flute from the time I was about 3. And I started the flute when I was about 10. I wrote some music when I was little. I wrote something when I was 5, and then a couple of things when I was 7. And then, I wrote some flute music, I guess, in my teens. I studied with Julius Baker, and I went to his master class when I was 15, and I wrote a scherzo, which people still play. It was my first published piece. I wrote a few things, and then I went to Juilliard myself to study the flute. And at that time, all the music I heard was atonal stuff, and there was a lot of music with tape and so forth. And I just thought, well, I can't do this. I don't like that music, and I guess people aren't interested in what I want to do. And I just didn't write. And then a friend of mine asked me to write. He wanted to write a musical in my early 20s, so I wrote a musical, and that sort of got me started to compose again. And because I'd written in high school, I wrote 3 musicals, which we did at my high school. And then, I don't know, I guess after that, somebody asked me to write, I guess it was a birthday present for a very wealthy guy in New York City. And I'd won this thing called Young Concert Artists, which is like a management thing for young people. And the woman who runs it, I guess on her board, this guy was on her board, and she said, do you think you could write something for Mortimer Levitt's 80th birthday? And I wrote a piece called Regrets and Resolutions. So it was kind of my first longish piece, more than a few minutes long. And I submitted it to Theodore Presser, who published it. And that was great, and it started a long relationship. I've now published. My friend Jenny just put all this into an email for me so I could know what it was. But I've written 169 pieces for flute and piano. Falls House publishes 66. Presser publishes 140, and I have 150 unpublished pieces for flute and piano. So I've written a lot of music. I think I've written over 900 pieces now.
Wow!
And it's kind of taken over my. When I was in my early 20s, I thought I really wanted to play a lot of concerts, and I did some concerts, and I still do. But I'm not the greatest self-promoter in the world. I don't enjoy. I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not a very political person. I'm a pretty upfront kind of a person, and I'm also a very private person. I'm pretty shy and introverted, and I don't know. Over time, more and more, I really wanted to write, because the playing thing, it requires an awful lot of that other stuff usually.
Sure.
So, I love to play, and a big part of my life every day is picking up my my flute and seeing, how I can do this thing better. I'm always working on my technique. I also play the harp. I taught myself how to play the harp. I started about 7 years ago, and that's kind of taken over. I've written a lot of harp music.
Yeah, I shamelessly follow you on social media, and I love your Facebook video clips of you playing.
Oh, yeah, that makes me really happy. I'm glad you're shameless. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you play the harp beautifully, and I love hearing those video clips. And I think just for people, especially like young musicians, to start grasping and understanding the process. And, you're showing like, oh, how does this sound? And you can tell your creativity side coming through as you're exploring that instrument.
I appreciate it. Well, I mean, in a certain way, it's really freeing because I don't have nearly the technique that I do on the flute. So it's like, well, why bother? I just play it, because it's an exploration, and it's taught me a lot about playing the flute too. I mean, I've learned a lot about my hands from playing the harp, things I've never thought about on the flute. And it's informed my technique quite a bit. So it's been a great adventure for me, learning a new instrument. And it's ironic because my dad played the harp, and I had zero interest in the harp. As my dad passed away, I even inherited my father's harp, and I had it for a little while, and I had it out in Pennsylvania, and every time I get to PA, another string would be broken. It was like, what? Just so frustrating trying to stay on top of an instrument that I barely had interest in playing. So I sold it, and then really good harpist called Emily Mitchell contacted me, and I'd written a piece 25 years ago, a long time ago, and it was just called Four Preludes. And she said, I'm looking at this piece you wrote, and I really like it, and I want to record it, and I think we should record some of your chamber music. And I said, well, I love that idea. And at the time, anyway, Emily and I got together, and, I really didn't play harp then, so she said, you can't do this, and you can't do that. And so I made changes. And I'd like to add here that any decent composer should always be willing to listen to players, because they have to play it, I mean, I can't tell you how many flute pieces. I don't want to get myself in trouble, so I'll keep my mouth shut. But there have been several flute concertos that I've had to play, and I literally can't remember a single note of them. I memorize them. I perform them. They're gone because, A, I didn't like them, but part of the reason why I didn't like them was because they were so badly written for the instrument.
Oh, sure.
So, you take a piece of Chopin on the piano, and it might be hard, but when it works, it's amazing.
Right.
I've always felt that that's how, the best music takes the performers into consideration.
So you would say that is definitely one of your goals and intentions as a composer, is to make sure that you're writing well for that specific instrument.
Absolutely. I mean, I just did a couple of... there's a South American, a Colombian composer called Luis Calvo, who I love his music. He wrote piano music, and he had an interesting life. I think he had a very lonely life because he had leprosy, and he was kind of isolated. And he wrote these beautiful, pretty simple things. And you can hear a lot of Chopin in his music, but it's not nearly as adventurous, really, even harmonically. It's just pretty simple, but it's gorgeous. It's very true. And his most famous piece is a piece called Malvaloca. And I made an arrangement for flute and harp, which worked well. And then somebody asked me, oh, could you arrange this for guitar and flute? And so I thought, well, I don't know. So I tried it. And then I got together with the guitarist, and it really took me a while because the guitar is so different from the harp. The guitar has no sustain.
Sure.
So you end up having to do all kinds of dirty things that you would never do on the piano or even on the harp. I mean, you would just never play chords because partly, of course, you're dealing with the limitations of, you can only go this far on this string. And, it's a very difficult instrument. So anyway, I just went to the guitarist and I said, hey, how do I make... actually, I wrote a piece for flute and guitar, which is one of my favorite things I've written. I wrote a piece called Hypnotized for Jason Vio, who I played a lot of concerts with Jason. He's a fantastic guitarist. And the harpist Yolanda Condonasis, who plays in the Cleveland Orchestra.
Yes.
Great player. And they're really good together. So they asked me to write a duo for harp and guitar. And I thought, well, that's a weird combo, you know? And it just came out really well, I guess, because what's so interesting about that is the harp, everything rings, and a lot of playing the harp is getting stuff out of the way, you know.
Sure.
And whereas the guitar, it doesn't ring. It's all about, you know, figuring how to voice things so that what it can ring is so beautiful. So essentially in that piece, I made the guitar more the solo instrument.
Oh, okay.
But it's kind of a neat piece. I really like the way that one came out, and it kind of wrote itself. So I'm not a real struggler as a composer. I just sort of do it.
Okay. And that segues beautifully into what I was going to ask you next. I'm sure every piece and every ensemble, the piece and the process is so different and unique from one another. But do you have a general process as you compose a new work?
Sure. I mean, if it's just something I'm writing rather than a commission, usually it happens because I'm in a kind of a gray space. I'm not usually super happy or really super sad, but I'm just kind of like, you know, usually practicing gets me really excited. I mean, I'm one of those people. I really like to practice. I mean, I remember years ago, a pretty famous person, I won't mention any names again, but she's pretty well known. And I said, no, I really like practicing. And she just looked at me like I was nuts. Because I think because she had to, you know, there were so many orchestra rehearsals and there were so many things where you had to play.
Right.
And I think that's really hard on a lot of players because you lose the joy that comes, the spontaneity that comes from, well, why did you want to do this in the first place?
Yeah.
But I really enjoy it. But, you know, sometimes I'll get to a point where I'm practicing. It's like, I don't know what I want to play. And I just can't bear to play that kulao. I can't make myself play that thing again. You know, that thing.
Right.
That French thing that I've played so many times. And so, I mean, usually then I was like, I don't know. And so and then almost, it's, you know, something will just pop into my head. And then usually my reaction is, well, that's not very good. And then as soon as I have that reaction, I know that, that's what I have to write. Oh. So I listen to my negative self-talk and ignore it. And usually I come up with something when that happens.
How interesting. That's really neat. Thank you for showing us
how warped I am.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I think it's great just to hear everybody's, I'm sure, like, even if you think about and look at the other arts, you know, visual arts and literature. And it'd be kind of neat to talk to an author and see, you know, how he or she gets pen to paper, or, you know, how an artist puts paint on the oil and what their process is like, because everyone is different, I'm sure.
I think you're right. I've never been one of those, you know, you must sit down and write from 6 a.m. till 9 a.m. in the morning kind of people. It doesn't work for me. And I think my output is pretty large. I love some of mine. I like them all. There's nothing I dislike. I mean, if there's something that I just feel isn't going anywhere, it just ends up in my, I guess, not envelopes.
Right.
And there aren't too many in there. I pretty much want to follow through with whatever it is I'm doing.
Neat. So of all your compositions, because you have a huge canon and a huge repertoire, do you have a specific piece that is, I don't know, so dear to your heart and is one of your favorites?
Well, different pieces have different things that I really like. I mean, you know, mostly it's when my imagination just suddenly goes in a direction that's completely, really? And I just follow that, and it takes me somewhere which opens the music. I like when that happens. I have that happen. It's just, I don't know that there's one piece. I do get a little bit disappointed that people don't play more of my music. It seems like I get these constant requests for 3 dances for 2 flutes, which is, I mean, it's a cute piece, but, you know, I've written, even pieces like that, I've written others which are pretty much using it as a template, and they're equally fun, I think, but people tend to want to play what they've heard other people play.
Sure.
And it is kind of a difficult thing, with a flute, because there isn't a whole lot of great flute music. There's a lot of okay music.
Right.
I mean, there are some incredible pieces, but there are a lot of just okay pieces, and there's a lot of, I don't know, like sort of churned out music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess he wrote some good stuff, but I mean, I'm not a real big fan of composers like I mentioned Kuhlau before, and
right.
Reinicke and Kuhlau and all that sort of like, it's almost like paint by numbers. Now, some people that wrote a lot of music, I love Telemann.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love all those methodical sonatas. I think they're fantastic. And I mean, he was definitely kind of, I don't know, I think, those Telemann fantasies, I think they're really charming. They're very difficult for somebody to play. You've got to have a lot of technique, and you also have to be pretty astute to understand what's going on to pull them off. Otherwise, they're just like, what?
Definitely, I agree.
There's still a couple of them that I think fall into the what category, but I just imagine that he wrote those in like he just sat down and did them very quickly. I don't think that he spent hours on them.
Right. Huh.
But I think he was super talented, and they're all different kinds of, like you were saying, different compositional styles. My guess, and I know zilch about Telemann, but just judging from his output, that he wrote very quickly.
Interesting. I thought your answer was very interesting when you said, I have a lot of pieces that are played repetitively, but there are some pieces that I wish were played more. Mm-hmm. Do you have a specific, title?
Sure. Like, I've written 9 sonatas for flute, and somebody actually just recorded several of them, and the record's not out yet, but I mean the record, listen, I guess I'm showing my age.
That's okay.
The recording isn't out yet, but I mean, especially though, I recorded the 8th myself, and I really like the one, I wrote the 9th one, I wrote that, my brother passed away, and I wrote that after that happened. And I feel like those are very personal pieces, and also very complicated pieces in which the piano has at least an equal role.
Okay.
A lot of my flute stuff is, it's fun to show off. What can I say?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of my flute stuff, pieces like Airborne, and I've written lots of them.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece called Zinogliko, which is a Greek piece. Again, that actually has a kind of an internal quality, even with the fast stuff. But I've written a lot of stuff where the flute's just flying around. Like, I really like I wrote a piece called Musique Française, which I like a lot.
Okay.
And again, that has a lot of just showing off in it, and it's fun. It's caffeinated. There's like a lot of fast energy. Yeah.
Well, every year my high schoolers have a UIL competition where they do a solo and ensemble contest, and and that's throughout the nation. But every year I pull out, their solos, and they get to pick out a solo, and repeatedly every year, and then I'll show them ensembles and the repertoire I have in that, and I'll play little snippets so that way they can choose something that interests them, because if they're not interested, then they're not going to want to practice.
Right.
But your Flutes in the Garden, that flute trio, comes up every year that my kiddos just love, and they want to learn it. So I think especially for students to find something that fascinates them, I think that's really exciting. So it's just an observation and a comment that I wanted.
Nice. It's great to know. I mean, multiple flute music is a whole genre unto itself.
Right.
Trying to make it interesting, and it's really hard, I think, sometimes when a bunch of flute players try to play together. And I know flute choirs are popular, and it's difficult because the nature of the flute is ultimately to float.
Yeah.
And so how do you get a big floating thing? It's like the Hindenburg. You know what I mean? How do you get a big floating thing to have energy that isn't just dissipating, And so it's a challenge writing for them. I enjoy it. It's just it's a whole different thing from writing. The piano is so great because the piano propels things forward.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so true. I love how you said that, how, the flute floats. And when you've got multiple flutes, how do you get all of them to float?
And sometimes you get an awful lot of people on one part, and then, you get it's like if I have to go sometime if I go somewhere and I have to coach a piece of mine for a flute choir, it's so tricky because so many problems have nothing to do with music. They have to do with how somebody plays. And if somebody's making their vibrato in a way that's causing intonation problems, telling them that they're sharp or flat on a note will do absolutely nothing, because they'll overcorrect and they'll make it worse.
Right.
So it's always, how much time do I have to analyze everybody's technique in this room, So it's interesting dealing with that problem.
Sure. This question comes from just my observations from teaching a particular student that I had last year. And I won't say her name, but I noticed that she had this very creative, intelligent young lady, but this very artistic, creative side. And in the middle of flute lessons, she would almost kind of stop and do a theatrical number, or she would say, oh, that phrase reminds me of this color or this sound. And it was just right in my face that this girl has so many unique creative ideas. And I asked her, I said, have you ever thought about composing? And she's like, oh, I would love to. And I have all these, melodies in my head. I said, well, here, and I gave her a manuscript paper and I said, go home this weekend and write up something that, you would love to hear on your instrument. And she came back and she had this little flute duet composed out. And we played it together, and I am by no means a composer, but I have enough music theory background to be able to direct her and to help her with her writing. And then, the next thing you know, she's taking off with this. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that just by my luck, to be able to say, hey, you've got something here, let's see where it goes. And then I directed her to a composition TA in the department. But so this question comes from just that insight that I had with that particular student. Do you have any advice for that budding new composer?
How old is this student?
She was a sophomore in high school.
So she was 15 or something like that?
Yeah, about 15, yeah.
Yeah, well, I would just say you did a great thing. What you did was very smart, very intuitive, and you followed your intuition. And you would just want to encourage someone like that to follow their own intuition, because speaking from my own education as a composer, it came from my playing other people's music. I never studied composition. And indeed, my father in junior high or something, I think he decided that I should take some composition lessons. So I'm from Easton, PA, and so there was this guy on the faculty at the Lafayette College here, and he gave me some chorale prelude to what do they call it when you write out all the voices for it, and he gave the thing back to me, and it was just I never saw so many red marks on one page, and I just thought, oh, please, I'm not going to do this. If I have to be a composer, I can't do all this stuff. And it really kind of set me back, because I don't operate that way. I'm very much somebody who likes to teach themselves how to do what they do. I'm pretty stubborn. I studied flute with Julius Baker, and he had a gorgeous, gorgeous sound, but he never said a word. He never said anything about my technique. Never. It was oh, you're terrific. Or, well, then there was the old school of telling me how great someone else sounded so that he could tell them how great I sounded to make us all hate each other.
Oh, no.
Yeah, a real old school. But the thing is, I really had to teach myself how to, I always had the instinct to play, and I played well. I won contests, and I played with the New York Philharmonic when I was 15, and I played with the Philadelphia Orchestra when I was 15. And I was able to play, but as I got into my late 20s and my early 30s, I really started having back problems. And that's when I started studying the Alexander technique, which I studied for about 20 years.
Wow.
Actively. I still would say I pay attention to everything more because of it. But I literally, I took lessons all the time. But really, that's how I figured out my technique physically, by getting more aware of what my body was doing, so that I understood how I was creating the sound. It wasn't just like magic coming through my talent.
Right.
But I mean, even like with a harp, I tried harp lessons with a couple people, and they both they would tell me to do things that their teachers told them to do, but they weren't really looking at what I was doing and saying, see, when I teach a student, I watch them play, or I listen to them play. Actually, usually I can tell better what they're doing if I leave the room, and I can hear them from a distance, and I can feel where they're making their sound. I can feel where the vibrato is. I can feel where, their support is. I can sense what's wrong with the hands. And then I say, okay, this is how you're doing it. And then I play it back.
Okay.
And then I say, now, what would happen if you tried this? And what would happen if you tried that? And so forth and so on. And that's how, essentially, I teach them to teach themselves.
Yes.
By making them aware. So I'm not big on, okay, everybody, now you have to play these scales for 2 hours every day, and make sure you hold your right arm this way, and make sure your right foot isn't always behind your left foot, and blah, blah. I don't buy all that stuff. And I mean, it's like all these people come out with these method books for playing the flute, and I just scratch my head and I think, really?
Right.
Everybody's different. I mean, even down to the finger length.
Yep.
And so I really try to, so anyway, with composing, I guess I really just needed to figure it out on my own. I didn't do the standard study of harmony and theory and all that. I mean, I had some theory at Juilliard, but
right.
I think when I went to Juilliard, all that was pretty laughable. Now they really have to know it.
Yeah, they do.
But when I went there, I remember I had David Diamond for one class, and we were supposed to write a fugue, and I said, I have this concert next week. He said, oh, don't worry about it. It's like, okay.
Yeah, but you're so right. Like, every student is so unique, like, a fingerprint. I mean, it's just, I had a lesson this morning with a beginner, and she has a teardrop, and she was just like, becoming obsessed with, something her band director said. And she's like, I have a teardrop. I can't play. I'm like, yes, you can. Everybody, there are tons of professional flutists out there who play offset. And she's like, well, I feel this and I'm blowing off to the side. I'm like, great. Okay. Use.
No, just tell her to look at Ron Paul. Ron Paul plays on the side. I play way over on the side because I've got a bead in my top lip. Yeah.
And I showed her, I said, here, just watch me play. And I pull dramatically to the right. And when I worked with Lisa Garner-Santa at Texas Tech for my DMA, Lisa plays extremely off to the right as well. I said, you have thousands of minutes in a week, and our lesson is only 30 minutes. It's a sliver of time. I'm going to give you the right tools, but my main goal is to make you your best teacher, your own best teacher, because you're going to have to guide and use your ears as a guide to find that sound that's yours and not become so obsessed with this or that or and it's just too much, and it's a lot for a young student to take in. So I can relate with what you're saying with, all these methodology books saying this, that, and it's just like you said perfectly, you kind of scratch your head thinking, wait, time out, let me back up, because at the end of the day, we all have different faces and lips and bodies and arms. And so you have to find what works well for you.
And you don't want to, like, getting back to your sophomore, you don't want to frighten people off. If you're dealing with somebody who's seeing colors when she's hearing music, you're dealing with a very sensitive person. Mm-hmm. You don't want to scare a sensitive person because they scare easy. Mm. You know what? I've seen it again and again. I teach a master class at this Holy Cross Monastery up on the Hudson River. I do one every summer and one in the winter, and I think my 45th is coming up. I have not been doing it for 45 years, no. But for a while we were doing 3 every summer and so forth. So we sort of cut it back to twice a year. But, I always see the students who come in and they pick up the most difficult piece of music and they just go right through it like an express train, and they can play anything. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing coming out of them. There's no enthusiasm. There's no beauty. It's all just if you could hold a flute up to an electric fan, and then the ones that come in and they can barely play, and they're the ones, when you get them to open up and relax, they can move you, because you realize what's stopping them is their fear. And so, sensitivity is a big part of music. And unfortunately, I guess because of our society and our attitude towards, I guess, what's important, more and more I hear people who they can pretty much just nail things, but you would never want to listen to them.
Yeah. I've been calling it, and I've been telling some of my high schoolers and college students, they're ripping through the technique. Their notes, their fingers are there, and the rhythms are there. And I tell them, I say, well, talk about showing your age. I refer to it as typewriter playing. It just feels very mechanical and very vertical, and there's no connection, and there's no emotion or their personality coming through, or what is the composer really trying to say in this particular piece?
Or what are you trying to say in this particular piece?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I've been calling it typewriter playing, just for me, because when I first learned how to type on, before computers, we learned on the typewriter, and I don't know, just that motion, it just feels mechanical when people are just playing what's on the page rather than expressing themselves.
Well, I've always wondered how, and I think it requires a fairly unmusical personality, really. It requires somebody who doesn't really make music ultimately of the muse. It's supposed to be this thing that awakens the spirit. And the spirit, whatever it is, that whatever is coming through you, which moves people, which gets people to feel the same thing, basically, to connect you to them. People either have that or they don't. And a lot of times when I hear this other kind of playing, of course it's impressive to hear somebody just play everything. But I don't judge contests. I've done it a couple times, but I really don't do it. And I don't believe in them. I don't like them. I did judge one, an international competition, and I only did it because they wanted me to write a piece for it, and it was kind of a condition of my doing that.
Okay.
So I said, okay, I'll do it, but you have to allow me to award a prize to the person who I think plays my piece the best. And of course, it was the guy who didn't get into the final 6 people, and I thought he played it beautifully. And so, it's so amazing to me. I always ask myself, well, why would you want to go into this? If you don't feel it, why are you doing it?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Imagine, you wanted to be a visual artist, you wanted to be a painter, and you had tremendous technique, but when you painted, it didn't do anything. You'd look at it and you'd think, yeah, well, that looks exactly like a photograph. But what is it? We have a camera that we can take a photograph with.
Yeah, no, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Any last comments or suggestions? Anything you want to say to the educator or to a flutist or to the younger generation? Is there anything that you just want to get out there?
Well, I think that now there's so much available and so easily accessible. YouTube, and there's just so much. And I always scratch my head when a student doesn't seem interested in the music. They're interested in making sure they can play their part. But it's such a weird attitude. It's like, it's like looking at a play and just learning your lines, but not knowing what the play is about. It's so bizarre to me, because the whole point is the relationship between the players. So if you're going to play a piece that's, pieces that I really don't like is the Chaminade Concertino. Partially because it's just been played to death.
Yes.
There's so many other French pieces. If you want to play a French piece, why that one? I don't get it. But anyway, if you're going to play the Chaminade Concertino, now that we know how I feel about it, listen to it and play along with the recording. That's also very important. That's something I did always, because I was lucky. My dad and I played everything together, but also I had many records of Jean-Pierre Rampal and Julius Baker and, all those guys. And I would just play along. And that's how I learned. It's also a very good way to memorize music. Much better than staring at the page and, trying to remember what, the name of the next note is.
Right. Oh, great. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. I liked how you said about like actors and actresses and just, if you're going to be in part of that play, play that character, not just reading the words off the script.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't understand. I guess there's so many distractions now, and I think that's what it is. There's always that possibility that, your finger can just go to that iPad and go looking at whatever, the depressing news or, what somebody's doing on Facebook or what I can buy on Amazon or, there's always some way to kind of excuse yourself from your current circumstances.
Right.
I mean, the great thing about music and, practice or composing is it really puts you in your own milieu, in your own world. And that's really the place, I think, and at least for me, that's where I basically want to be. But I mean, it's a hard place, I think, maybe, because many people are afraid of being alone. But I'm at my best is pretty much when I'm doing my work.
Yeah.
And I think, if you've got the resources there, just like if you're going to flip around, like look at other people play things, listen to 30 people play a Bach sonata, and decide which one you like and why. And play along with them and see what all that's about, rather than just, liking the person that everybody else says is, the person you're supposed to like.
Right.
Develop your own mind.
Yeah, no, that's great. So for the last portion of the show, I've been doing a segment called Picks. Do you have any picks for today? It can be music related or not.
I like old flutes.
Okay.
I play mostly on old Haynes flutes. I really love the old scale because there's more harmonics built into the scale. It's been less cropped to make it easier, but I should qualify that it's easier to play them the wrong way.
Okay.
It's easier to play a new flute the wrong way. You're not going to be flat on the bottom or sharp on the top. But if you play a flute right, it plays perfectly in tune. I mean, if you listen to old recordings, you listen to Baker or listen to Elaine Schaefer, or they sound pretty awesome on those old flutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried the new ones and I just have never been able to get what I want out of them.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that pick. My pick for this week is something more general, and this was sparked by an old phone call from a previous high school band director of mine back in Chicago who called me, and we're going to get reacquainted in February so I can go out there and talk about podcasting and what it took to go through school and get different degrees in music to kind of hopefully inspire their students out there. But so my pick this week is to rekindle old relationships with a friend or a colleague or a mentor, and to also just create a space and a foundation for new relationships to form.
Sounds like a noble pick.
Yeah.
It is funny about old, it's one thing I've noticed with students. I have no idea how many people I've taught over the years, but I know it's a lot. And very rarely do students contact you. Like, for example, I guess it's really awkward when you're studying with somebody, when you decide you don't want to go back anymore, you just kind of vanish.
Right.
And I don't think students appreciate how weird that is for teachers.
Yeah. It is because weird.
You sort of feel, well, and some students are amazing. I mean, one of my students I taught as a kid is actually, you're in Texas, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I taught Jake and Gabe Fridkis, and they're the principal and now the new co-principal or whatever, assistant principal in Fort Worth.
Yes, I just heard that announcement. That's so exciting.
Right, and they have always stayed in touch. I taught them when they were 11 and 14 is when I started teaching them.
Oh, wow.
And, they're rare because most of the people, they just kind of go, and I never hear from them. And it's kind of sort of, I guess it's awkward for a student. They feel, embarrassed or I don't know. I guess it's like that old Oedipal thing of having to kill your parent,
Right.
But it is nice to contact your teacher.
Yeah.
After a while and say, hey, I just wanted you to know I'm doing this, or how are you? Or thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Or why did you do these terrible things to me? I'm miserable and it's all your fault.
Right? Yeah.
Something, right?
Something, yeah. Well, and I think the more that I teach, I realize how much, my teachers had invested in me over the years. And you just think, wow, they put so much time into lessons and, not just the hour lesson that you see them, but like lesson planning and getting ready for the lesson and the research and their own practicing so that way they can be a better teacher for you. And you realize as you get older, you want to tell them how much you appreciate that, and you don't want them to think that you took it for granted. And so I think the students, like you said, the ones that come back and reach out and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, it means a lot to you.
Absolutely. I think part of it, though, don't you think maybe gratitude is something that, people don't learn it so early in life?
Maybe, yeah.
I think sometimes it comes later.
Yeah.
I certainly have gratitude. I mean, I mentioned Julius Baker, and no, he wasn't a very verbal teacher, but if I'd never heard him play, I mean, he's so helped shape my concept of sound. If I'd never heard it, I mean, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So, of course, I'm grateful. I think it is good, and I think gratitude is a good pick.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, Gary, I hope you have a great weekend, and I know your time is very precious, and I don't want to hold you up any longer, but I so appreciate the time you've given me, and I learned a lot.
Well, you're great. You have a really open and generous attitude, and I appreciate it, and it's my pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, well, we'll be in touch sometime or other, and good luck with this project.
Thank you so much, Gary. Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.